Logan, and Casper. Welcome to my presentation on my toolbox for equity in STEM teaching. So I have divided my toolbox into 4 different folders, and this one here seems to have been labeled incorrectly, so this should be classroom activities as number 3. But we've got 4 different folders. The first one is culturally responsive teaching. Second one is next generation science standards. Third one is classroom activities, and the fourth one is reflection. So we'll go ahead and start with the culturally responsive teaching folder. So in the culturally responsive teaching folder, we have like 4 additional breakdowns. Like at the top of the screen, we've got closing the gap, implicit biases, justice-centered pedagogy, and socio-scientific issues, and then anchoring phenomena. The 3 items that I left outside of like additional filing is the culturally responsive teaching article, because I feel like that encompasses the entire folder. The funds of knowledge, not article, but we watched a video, or this might have been a podcast actually, but I went ahead and took the funds of knowledge, and I've got the link here, so I always have the link, and then I went and got my reflection from the discussion board and put it here. And so I kept that outside of one of these 3 folders because, one of these 4 folders, because I feel like it really just encompasses a lot of it. It could have gone into anchoring phenomena, but I don't know, I just wanted to keep it outside. And so the last one that I have outside of the 4 folders is educating all students, which was a peer-reviewed article that I went and found on ProQuest that I had posted during week 14. And this was one of the articles that I shared when we did our sharing in class. And so this just talks more about like how to prepare yourself, like as to like be a culturally responsive teaching or teacher, and it also gives a list of strategies and then some other people that have written on this topic that you can go and like take a look at what they have to say about culturally responsive teaching. Okay. So let's go into our first folder here, which is closing the gap. And I didn't want to label it achievement gap or opportunity gap because that was a very large discussion in our class, was, what to call that. So in order here, I have the Gorski article about poverty and education. I have the Elephant in the Room article, which was about the No Child Left Behind Act, and how the media, was portraying those things. And then I have the graphic that we submitted to the discussion post. So I definitely wanted to hang on to this graphic because I felt like it really captured my thinking at the time, like when it was really fresh and we were talking about it in class. So I definitely wanted to make sure that was here and that I can like go back and reference like my thoughts very quickly. And then I have these 2 articles that I can go back, and when I'm looking at my graphic and I'm like reading something like maybe I don't understand, I can go back to the articles here and like review them so that they're always here, and talking about deficit ideology and the structural ideology with Gorski, and then the flaws from the No Child Left Behind Act, and then like what Oprah had to say on the subject and all that stuff that was going on in Chicago. So that's what I have in my closing the gap folder. In the implicit biases folder, this one's pretty large. So this is like implicit biases and classroom culture. I started this folder off with the video. Now I don't know, I'll just pronounce her last name, Nasir, the Nasir video, and I went ahead and copy and pasted what I had written on the Canvas discussion board, and I of course have the video linked here so that I can go back and watch it if I would like to. But I actually really enjoy this video. I feel like it opened my eyes to some things that I hadn't been thinking about before. So I definitely wanted to make sure that it was a part of my toolbox, and I think that's one of the actually like advantages of us doing our toolbox digitally is that I can go ahead and have links to YouTube videos, links to the podcast that we've used in class, and I can always have them here as a part of my toolbox. The second one is another video, or this was the podcast maybe. Yeah, this was the Harvard podcast, and I also have the descriptions of what I wrote in the Canvas discussion board, and this I thought was a really great podcast. Talking about our unconscious biases. Those were really eye-opening activities that we did in class, and I wanted to make sure that I had this in my toolbox to go back and look at when I needed to. The Color Brave TED Talk, that was a really great one too. I also like that one because it's like short and sweet. I also thought, she was a great speaker. I thought she had some really awesome points to get across, and it really helped me like really start to understand kind of like the negative things that like colorblindness like has become. Like, even though it started off as something that policymakers or administration thought would be like a good thing, we now know that it is clearly colorblindness is not a good thing. And so I have her TED Talk here that I can go back and listen to. The Language Identity Cognition is that 7-minute video from Brian Brown, and it keeps wanting me to change the URLs. But this one was great because I feel like he packed so much into just 7 minutes that this would be a great one to go back. And this one is like especially focusing on language, and especially in like as we are STEM educators, I feel like language can get overlooked a lot. As I was in RED this semester, the Reading Across the Content Areas class, I was challenged to think about how to incorporate linguistics more into my lesson planning. So listening to Brian Brown and his thoughts on language in the classroom and focusing on how we should be allowing students, or we should always allow students to be the ones having the conversations and do the sense making by talking about phenomena in their regular speaking vocabulary and things like that, not forcing them to start off with the science lingo, is really important. So I went ahead and got my thoughts from the discussion board and put them here. All right, and then we've got 3 articles here as well, which all corresponded with the discussion posts when we were doing them. So this is the Confronting Colorblindness article by Fergus, and I really have these in here just so, this one's a great article because it has like things like this yellow sticky note where you can go and like very quickly like see the main points of the article. So this one's really great. It's also like not that long of a read, but it's good to have in here, just to be able to refresh yourself. Same with these, the Avoiding Racial Equity by Gorski, and the Pedagogy of Poverty. Pedagogy of Poverty article. So those are good ones to just have here to be able to look at and refresh yourself on. This one also has like a nice breakdown, like this part right here, where it defines like the core functions of urban teaching, and then what we can do or how those can be interpreted in different ways. So those articles, these 3 articles can just like support the thoughts that I had from the 4 like multimedia links above. All right, in my justice-centered pedagogy / socio-scientific issues folder, I have the justice-centered pedagogy video from Morales Doyle in here. Yes. And I have that copy and pasted all of my thoughts from the discussion board in here. And so this one is good to have in my toolbox, just as the other multimedia links went. If I ever, am feeling like lost in my lesson planning, if it comes to like whether or not I want to involve an SSI or not, how I should implement that in the lesson, I can always come back to this resource and, re-listen to this interview and get some really good thoughts on how to go about that. And then the other two that I have in here are the socio-scientific issues in primary classrooms and the socio-scientific issues in environmental education. So those are both really good. This one is definitely a little bit more of a dense read, but it has like some great examples of MEAs in it, which are great. So I could have placed this article into the classroom activities folder, but I chose to keep it in here so that it would be more surrounded with like the other relevant pieces. And the socio-scientific issues approach to environmental education, another great article. This one is definitely a dense read as well, but it talks about a lot of the things that Morales Doyle talks about in his video as well, and it has some like nice graphics in it, but they're good things for review. But it does give like a couple examples here of ways you can be incorporating an SSI into my lesson. So that was everything for the culturally responsive teaching folder. So we go ahead and move into the NGSS folder. So in my NGSS folder, I have three-dimensional instruction, which is an article that I found and presented on when we had the class discussion. And so this just gives like a very brief breakdown about NGSS and involving the cross-cutting concepts, disciplinary core ideas, and science and engineering practices that build up the three-dimensional classroom. And so this is like short and sweet, kind of an article. Talks a little bit about anchoring phenomena, and that I really liked this figure. I was trying to remember why I liked this article so much. I think this figure is pretty great. Talking about anchoring phenomena. But this is just a good one to have on hand for when, especially in the state of Florida, when, we haven't adopted the NGSS standards yet, but we're still trying to put them into practice. I think it's a good thing to reference. The Addressing Student Diversity and Equity article that we read in class is very similar in a lot of ways to the one that we just looked at, the three-dimensional instruction. But this one I feel like focuses on students more, and the other one focuses on teachers more. So this is great to have to be able to reference, to put yourself back into a mindset of, what are your students' needs? Like, what do they need to come first? Gives this very compact little table here, talking about some different demographic groups, and is just another great little short read. And then I put the problematizing article that we dealt with during class. I think it was in maybe I feel like it was in week 4 or 6. But I put the problematizing article into NGSS because I feel like problematizing itself is, or like could be considered one of, or if not a combination of, the next generation science standards. So although this read is like, this is a pretty in-depth read, as in I use the word dense again, it is good to have in here. And it does have this nice dialogue in here as well that we talked about in class, that you can go back and reference and look at and see like actual examples, like concrete examples of problematizing. That way, you can know if you are facilitating that for your students in your classroom or not, based on what this article is talking about. So that's the NGSS folder, pretty sweet and to the point. Our classroom activities folder, we've got a couple things in here. The first one is the Thinking About Science survey that we did, and I think the third week of classes we did this. And I wanted to put this in here because I think it would be a great thing to have my students do, as maybe like a first or second day of school activity, just to get their brains really like immersed in thinking about science, like what it means to be doing science, so that they know that for the rest of the school year, like I'm setting up this norm of them, they're going to be doing science, in my classroom. It's not going to be lectures every day, all day long, where I'm the one doing the sense making, and they're just probably sitting there not doing much of the sense making. After, I have the Funds of Knowledge survey in here as well, which we did in class, but I thought this would be a good activity to kind of acquaint the students with one another, depending on what grade level I'm teaching or like what class I'm actually teaching. There could very much be a chance where I have a group of students that are very familiar with one another or a group of students that don't know each other at all. So having this Funds of Knowledge activity, just like what we did when we went over it over Zoom, I thought it could be a great way to acquaint students with one another, and it will also give me a lot of data to look at to see where my students are coming from. Next, I have the umbrella Ology activity in here. I really liked when we did this activity in class. I thought it struck up a great dialogue, and I feel like this could bounce right off of the Thinking About Science survey, so doing the umbrella Ology activity / discussion in class during that first week of school, I think could be super beneficial. And then some other concrete tasks that I included was the Mosquito Lab. I thought we did a great job, or Sherry did a great job conducting this, virtually over Zoom for us. It was a challenge, but I still think it was a super, super great activity. So I went ahead and put the lesson plan in here, and it's also just a great way, or it's a perfect example of a lesson plan that uses SSI, and I just wanted to keep that in here. And then I have the border problem in here, which I know I'm going into science, but I feel like the border problem is just a great task to reference. It's kind of like the balance problem or the tanker car problem. So just some of those things that we looked at it knowing and learning. But I just wanted to have it in here because it's not only just a rich task, but just it goes to show that you don't always have to have these like super complicated setups and labs and all kinds of things like that to engage your students in really rich discourse and problem solving and like problematizing. And then I have the MEA home run article in here as well, which can be used to review. And if you're like trying to create an MEA from scratch, I feel like this would definitely be something you'd want to be referencing. I know there's a lot of great MEAs out there that you can go and find, but let's say I wanted to make one completely from scratch. Having this article on hand or just giving it like a quick read before I start doing my actual lesson planning would be great, because it was super in-depth when they had this example of the students counting the crystals covering the light post. I thought that was or the crystals covering the light post, but then relating it back to their baseball bats. I thought that was super cool. So just a great one to be able to review. So that's all I have in my classroom activities folder. And then the last folder I called reflection, partially because I feel like what I put in it, like what these 6 things are things that can really benefit like me as a teacher and my pedagogy. And I also like labeled it reflection because there may not like be a specific time where I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember this article, or I'm trying to like figure out what it means to be a culturally responsive teacher, or what's a good anchoring phenomena. So this one is just some things that I wanted to read over whenever I wanted to. I started with the list that we compiled during week 12 or 13, I think, of the things that teachers need to know. And so I wanted to keep that in here because I had pulled some really good quotes from what I had written, and I thought it was just a pretty good all-encompassing list with maybe I could add like a few bullet points at the end here about what we talked about at the very end of class. The next one I have is the science checklist. We used this in the math one at the very beginning of class, and it's a PDF version of this entire checklist and all 7 of these bullet points from the Berkeley website. So this is a great one. It gives all these examples, and it's very user friendly. I really like the website, and I almost feel like this one could be printed off and given to students after they do the What is Science survey or the Funds of Knowledge survey. So I really, really liked that handout, so I wanted to put it in here. The third one is the impacts and beliefs of teaching mathematics. So this was like one of the very first articles we read, this Paul Ernest article. And although it's focusing on mathematics, it can definitely be translated to science. It's talking about how a teacher's beliefs affect their teaching. This diagram here is also really great to look at. And I thought it was just a great one for self-reflection, to go back and look at whenever I'm feeling a little, lost or feeling like I'm in a dark place, like I need to just refocus on how I'm teaching. This one, that's what I was looking for. I was thinking about the subjectivity article as I was looking at that Paul Ernest one, and I was like, I know I have something about subjectivity in here, and it's this one. I have it right afterwards. So, subjectivity and objectivity in science article that we had to read. This was another article that really struck up a great dialogue in class when we went over it, and I feel like it would be great for me to go and review it from time to time, especially since it's broken down into nice chunks, so I could just read, one chunk at a time. Number 5, we've got reflections in doing and teaching mathematics. This was the article that we got. Science or mathematics is the science of puzzles, I think was the quote. And that was really, really got us thinking in class, and I thought that would just be a great one. There might even be a lesson in here somewhere that I could pull out when doing, talking about nature of science and those kinds of things. And I really liked this article, so I wanted to make sure it was in here. And then the very last thing I have is the Teaching Science to Every Child PDF, and focusing on the nature of science. And so this one relates, it definitely talks about NGSS in here, so I thought about putting it in the NGS folder, but just because it's so long, I wanted to put it in the reflection folder, because I feel like it covers so much of what we talked about. I know I'm going off course here, I just kind of threw myself around, but I realized that I forgot the anchoring phenomena folder about halfway through when I was doing my reflection folder. I was like, wait a minute, there's definitely something in here that I didn't talk about. And I realized I totally skipped over the anchoring phenomena. So just to make sure everyone was on the same page, we were in the reflection folder, we were looking at Teaching Science to Every Child, then I went back to the main toolbox area, went back to culturally responsive teaching, and realized that I completely skipped over anchoring phenomena. So my anchoring phenomena folder, very quickly, we've got the phenomena-based instruction, the McGraw and Hill article, and it's great because it's broken down super easily. This was one that I went and found on ProQuest. So it, defines your anchoring phenomena, what a teacher should be doing, and it's got a great example of anchoring phenomena as well. So I really like this one. I like the way it's laid out. I think it's super great. Oops. We're still in anchoring phenomena folder. Then I have the planning for engagement article. And this one was great because it had some graphics and stuff. It was like pretty easy to read. It made it super straightforward about, what an anchoring event is, why are we using them, and how we can use them effectively. Oops, keep hitting the wrong arrows. Then the third one I have in here is, so this is related to NGSS designed lessons and units, which I of course could have put in the NGSS folder, but I wanted to keep it in here because it's talking about anchoring phenomena in a super nice, short, compact way, and I don't necessarily have to, I wanted to be in here with the anchoring phenomena stuff and not the NGSS stuff because we can be doing anchoring phenomena without doing NGSS, but you're ideally doing it all at the same time, so it didn't really matter where it ended up. I just felt this was more appropriate. So this just continues to talk, about how phenomena is effective and, how it drives teaching, and it really builds the three-dimensional learning with the cross-cutting concepts and the practices and the big ideas. Then we've got three common mistakes using anchoring phenomena. This was a blog post. I thought this would be great to have in here, just because it's sweet and simple to the point. It's also kind of relieving though, because it can be very overwhelming when picking out phenomena, and this is in here to kind of remind you that it doesn't have to be as scary as it seems. And then the last one is a link to another site, a link to a Georgia education site that gives a bunch of examples of anchoring phenomena. And so in here, obviously I couldn't turn it into a PDF or anything because it's a super interactive website. So it allegedly has 254 anchoring phenomena along with lesson resources and things like that. So I thought this would be a great link to have. And whoever put this website together, did a fantastic job because it's super easy to use. It's got the pictures and stuff, so you can very easily pick something out, click on it, and then, oh, well, that's just the picture, but you can read more. That's what I meant to click on. And then it's got all this information depending on what you click on. And okay, now I think I've covered everything in the culturally responsive teaching folder. I don't know how that got all messed up, but that means I've covered everything in my toolbox for you guys. So thank you for listening.